All right, I'm ready to start teaching you guys how to find the x-intercepts of a quadratic. Hopefully you know how to find the vertex, you know how to find the y-intercept, that's just given to you, that's the c value, the number that's all by itself. Finding the x-intercepts is much more complicated, and I'm technically not even going to show you how to do that for a couple days. We got to build up to that. And when I say build up to that, I mean we got to get some basic skills with quadratics. And the first one is an oldie but a goodie, and it's just combining like terms. If you had to combine like terms here, you would add these two quantities together. When I say quantity, I mean a parenthesis. So when you have two things or two or more things inside of a parenthesis, it's called a quantity. So this is the quantity of x, 3x plus 1, and plus the quantity of 5x minus 4 is how you would say that if you were reading it. The reason I'm showing you this is because you make a quadratic equation by actually multiplying two quantities together, and then you find the x-intercept by unmultiplying them, meaning factoring them. So that's where we're going here. We're eventually going to get to multiplying these together, and then the next step is I'm going to show you, or you're going to be given what the answer is to these being multiplied together, which is a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c, and you're going to have to separate them back into two quantities, which is called factoring. And that's how you find an x-intercept, is you factor a quadratic. But before we get into unmultiplying into factoring, we got to know how to multiply. And before we know how to multiply, we have to know how to add. So that's what we're doing today. We're just adding and a little subtracting as well. And when you add quantities, the parentheses mean nothing. So your next line could just be get rid of the parentheses. 3x plus 1 plus 5x minus 4. And the reason that they mean nothing is that, maybe you've heard me say this if you're paying attention before. When you're solving for x, or when you're doing PEMDAS, the first thing you do is get rid of your parentheses, p. How do you get rid of a parenthesis? You distribute the number in front of it through there. What's the number in front of these? There isn't one. That means it's a 1. And when you multiply by 1, nothing changes. So technically what we just did here, instead of just erasing the parentheses, is we distributed a 1. We did 1 times 3x, which is 3x. We did 1 times 1, which is 1. 1 times 5x is 5x. 1 times negative 4 is negative 4. So we just distributed the 1 through and we got rid of the parentheses. Now we can combine our like terms. We have a 3x and a 5x. They're both positive, so that makes 8x. And we have a positive 1 and a negative 4. That means we have $1, but we owe $4. We owe more than what we have. We're going to owe $3 minus 3. And that's it. That's combining like terms, 8x minus 3. So it starts off pretty simple. Now, if you have to subtract quantities, it gets a little bit more complicated, only because the initial distribution messes people up. If it's a subtraction problem, we still have to get rid of the parentheses first, which means we still have to distribute the 1 through. In the first quantity, that's not going to change anything because 1 times anything is just itself. So 1 times 3x and 1 times 1 gives you 3x plus 1. We distribute the 1 through, our parentheses gone. Now we're distributing a negative 1 through the next parenthesis. And when you distribute a negative 1 through, it changes all the signs. So that positive 5x is going to become a negative 5x. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 5, so that becomes minus 5x. And negative 1 times negative 4, a negative times a negative, is a positive. That becomes a plus 4. Essentially, when you multiply by a negative, it changes the sign. So our positive 5x became a negative 5x, and our negative 4 became a positive 4. Now we're right back to where we were before. We distributed our number through to get rid of the parentheses. Now we can combine our like terms. We have a positive 3x and a negative 5x. So we have $3, but we owe $5. We owe more. So we're at negative 2x. and then we have a positive 1 and a positive 4. We have $1 in this hand and $4 in that hand. We have $5 total. Negative 2x plus 5 is the answer when you subtract those two quantities. And that's it, people. Tomorrow I'm going to make a video about multiplying these two quantities together. And how do you know when you're supposed to do that? It's when there's nothing in between the quantities. If there's nothing there, they'll actually be closer together. They'll be right next to each other. When the quantities, the parentheses are right next to each other, that means multiply the two quantities together. And it's still just distributing, just a little bit more work to do. So that'll be tomorrow, and then we'll really start getting close to finding X-intercepts. But for now, it's just simple combining like terms of quantities.